My name is Evelyn Hart. I spent 40 years building a life with my husband. Every board, every nail, his fingerprints on the banister. When headaches started waking me at dawn, I thought it was age. I never imagined the house he built would try to kill me. My son cared for the estate, but someone turned our home into a slow trap. It took my grandson, a young man who still smelled of sawdust, to find the truth. This is how the people I trusted almost buried me alive. Subscribe to Red Silk Revenge. We prove it's never too late to fight back. My name is Evelyn Hart. I spent 40 years building a life with my husband. Every board, every nail, his fingerprints on the banister. When headaches started waking me at dawn, I thought it was age. I never imagined the house he built would try to kill me. My son cared for the estate, but someone turned our home into a slow trap. It took my grandson, a young man who still smelled of sawdust, to find the truth. This is how the people I trusted almost buried me alive. Subscribe to Red Silk Revenge. We prove it's never too late to fight back. Exposure, he said. You were lucky to come in when you did. Daniel grinned in the hallway when we came home.
See?
All fixed, he said, pressing the smoke detector's test button. It bleeped a bright, mechanical beat. Good as new. I felt relieved because I wanted to trust his hands. But the relief didn't hold. The headaches returned, richer, and my sleep turned into a shallow, waiting thing. Luke came for dinner the weekend after I left the hospital. He was Robert's grandson and Robert's shadow. Broad shoulders, a careful patience, hands rough with work and wood dust. He'd learned carpentry in his grandfather's garage, learned to read a board like a person's mood. He always said the house felt honest with him. He spent his childhood climbing the porch rails and asking question after question. When he hugged me that night, he smelled like cedar and coffee and something I could still trust. Gran, he said later on the landing, what's wrong with the bedroom wall? You said there were cracks. He led me upstairs, crouched, and ran a palm along the hairline fracture above the window. His forehead folded. This isn't settling. He went to the vent and knocked. Solid. He squinted at the painted grate, and his jaw tightened. Who sealed this? He asked. Daniel appeared then, wiping his hands on a rag. Energy efficiency, he said. It was drafty, so I had it done. He meant well, and meaning isn't always a lie. Owen, Luke, tilted his head toward the ceiling where the carbon monoxide alarm hung like a white eye. He climbed on a chair and unscrewed the cover. He pulled out the innards and frowned. The battery is soldered in, he said softly. It can't chirp if something happens. Daniel laughed and said, It beeps. I tested it. Luke's face was a map that I couldn't read for a moment. He went silent, down the cellar steps, the old wooden ones Robert had reinforced decades ago. I waited until the scrape of his footsteps stopped. He came back with his phone. Photos, pipes, and a little metal canister tucked under the floorboards. A thin tube. A small timer with numbers like a clock's teeth. It's a release valve, Luke said. Set to open when the heat kicks on. The diner gone cold in my ribs. Someone had rigged the boiler and the vents so that a slow leak of carbon monoxide would drift first into my bedroom, into the room where I slept with Robert's photograph on the nightstand. Who would do? My voice broke like a twig. Luke looked at Daniel. The air slid away. Your father covered this vent and helped with the energy improvements, didn't he? He asked. Daniel's face, the careful engineer's face, held for a moment, then a crack. He opened his mouth and closed it. I don't, he began. Luke's thumbs hovered over the photo. He owns the skills, he said. He knows flow rates, seals. He's been stressed. He's been lying about work. I saw how grief can make people small, how fear can make a man feed on his advantages. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome. I could see the maple tree Robert had planted in the yard through the window. The maple that had watched every birthday, every fight, every quiet Sunday. It didn't know about the cold trap someone had installed beneath my bed. Pack a bag, Luke said finally. Now. For what? My voice was too small to be the same woman who'd argued over paint colors and lawn chairs. Because we're leaving this house. And you're not to call anyone. Not him. He said the last word like it was a broken glass. Daniel's face went pale. He moved toward his coat. Evie, listen. Luke's hand closed on my arm like iron. Don't, he said. If he's done this, he'll know if we call. The sedan out on the curb looked like a dark thought. I picked up my house keys like a relic and put them in my pocket. I left Robert's photo on the dresser. The driveway shrank beneath us as Luke drove with his jaw clenched, like he was bracing for impact. My home shrank with every mile. In the rearview mirror, the porch light blinked once, and then it was gone. We stopped at a diner under a buzz of tired neon. Luke showed me the photos of pipes and timers. He scrolled through messages he'd found, hints about fixing an inefficient system, half-sent emails with dates and numbers. He told me about layoffs at Daniel's company, about the money that had tightened like a vice. Each sentence landed like another weight in my chest. But why me? I asked. It was a small, ridiculous question. Why do bad seeds choose the garden where they were planted? Luke spoke slowly. Because if you die, the house goes into probate. The estate's clear. Once it's over, he doesn't have to worry about loans. He'll get his cut. He thinks he can engineer a slow death and make it look like age. His voice broke on the last word. The mechanic's patience in him frayed into the boy I'd watched on the porch steps. We need proof, he said. And we need to get you somewhere safe. The waitress poured coffee into a chipped mug and leaned on the counter, listening to nothing. Outside, the rain started. On the edge of the page that held my life, someone had put a smear of ink. Luke tapped the photo. There's one more thing, he said. He scrolled to a different image, a receipt with a neighbor's name and a timestamp from the day someone bought drywall and a small canister. The name on the receipt was familiar. I looked at the name and then at the man who had son's face, Daniel's hands clenched on the paper napkin in front of him. I can explain, he said. Luke slid the phone into his pocket. Not now. He stared at me. We prove this or we call the police. But we don't go back home. My throat closed. I thought of Robert and the smell of sawdust in the garage, of the night he taught me to sand and end knot until it was smooth. I thought of the maple tree. I thought too of my son at his worst. The nights I found him awake, counting numbers, the way he'd hide bills in a drawer and pretend to forget. In the end, that knowledge was a small, sharp truth. When we left the diner, the rain had become a curtain. Luke's hands were steady on the wheel, and his jaw was set like someone who'd just decided how a story would end. Daniel followed in his sedan, headlights like the eyes of a dog in the dark. I felt both grief and a rush of something like cold, clear clarity. We pulled into a motel with a blinking sign. Luke paid cash. We took one room. He put the photos on the bed like proof laid out for a jury of two. At 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of Daniel's car starting in the lot outside, a low, distant rumble like a promise. Luke's hand found mine in the darkness. Don't worry, he whispered. I won't let him do this. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Daniel's? I let it ring. Outside, someone shut a car door. The motel's neon hummed. The world narrowed to the thin slice of light beneath the curtains. I imagined my bedroom back home, the sealed vent, the silent alarm. The thought of going back made my bones leak. Then the phone stopped buzzing. The light outside faded. A shadow moved past the window like a long, slow thing. It wasn't a person I could name. It was the prelude to a choice. We had proof, but proof is paper and paper burns. The thing in the house was a quieter, meaner weapon. It didn't shout. It waited. And waiting is the last thing you ever want when someone is counting the beats until you stop. I pulled the covers tighter and listened to the slow, steady breathing of a boy who had become a man. The house remembered Robert. The house had been turned into someone else's plan. Somewhere, Daniel had decided that my life was an equation. Somewhere, Luke had decided that family could be more than DNA. I closed my eyes and tried to rest. Outside, a car started again. This time it did not leave. A knock sounded on the motel door at dawn. The knock came just after dawn, soft at first, then sharper, like someone deciding whether they were friend or threat. Luke's eyes opened immediately. He moved faster than I expected for someone who hadn't slept. He crossed the small motel room, looked through the peephole, and mouthed, "It's him." My throat closed. "Daniel?" I whispered. Luke nodded once. "Don't say anything." He cracked the door just enough for light to slip in. My son stood outside in yesterday's clothes, his eyes hollowed out by something beyond exhaustion. His hair was damp from rain or sweat. He held both hands up, empty. "I just want to talk," he said. Luke didn't move. "Please," Daniel said quietly. "I'm still your father, Luke." Luke's hand tightened on the doorknob. "That's not the word you want right now." Daniel looked past him, trying to find me in the dim motel light. "Mom," he said. "Please. You shouldn't have left. You don't understand what's happening." I stepped closer, against Luke's protest. "Then explain it," I said. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you built a coffin under my bedroom floor." He flinched. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what I should think," I said. He swallowed, his throat moving like he'd forgotten how. "Let me in. Please. I'll explain everything." Luke shut the door 3 inches and said through it, "You talk right here. We're recording this." Daniel's breath came out ragged. "Luke, for God's sake, I'm your father." Luke's voice was ice. "And she's my grandmother. You pick which one of those you'd rather be talking to right now." Silence stretched. Then Daniel's tone changed, lower, coaxing, the voice he used when he was smoothing things over. "Mom, listen. You've been sick. I know. That's my fault. I should have checked the vents sooner. There was a leak, but I fixed it." "Fixed it?" My voice cracked. "You sealed it. To keep the drafts out. And the gas in." Luke cut in. Daniel pressed his palms together, shaking his head. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand what it's like, losing everything you've worked for. I thought I could control it. Just for a while. I was going to fix the system once I got back on my feet. So poisoning me was a temporary inconvenience." I said. The words felt heavy in my mouth, like lead. His eyes glistened. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." Luke's jaw worked. "You're done talking," he said. He shut the door with a final click and locked it. We stood in silence while Daniel's footsteps retreated down the corridor. I sank onto the edge of the bed. "He was crying," I whispered. Luke crouched in front of me. "He's guilty, Grandma. He's not crying for you, he's crying because he got caught." By noon, we were parked outside a public library in a town 20 miles away. Luke said it was safer to use their Wi-Fi than our phones. He carried his laptop and a folder full of printed photos. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like wet metal. He pulled up the images he'd taken from the basement. "Look here," he said. "This timer isn't something you find at a hardware store. It's a programmable industrial switch, used in aerospace labs or high-level engineering environments." He zoomed in on a serial number etched into the metal. "If we trace this part, we can prove he ordered it. If it's tied to his company account, that's hard evidence." I stared at the screen, feeling both proud and terrified of the man my grandson had become. "How do we find that?" He smiled faintly. "I already did." He turned the laptop toward me again. On it was an invoice from a parts supplier. Apex Engineering Division, employee code DH12. D for Daniel. H for heart. I pressed a hand to my mouth. "That's him." Luke nodded. "He used his work account to buy a timer. Same model as the one under your floor. Ordered 3 months ago." The library's air conditioning hummed. Around us, a few people typed quietly, oblivious. The world outside moved like nothing was wrong. But everything was. "What do we do now?" I asked. "First," he said, "we back up everything. Photos, receipts, timestamps, video of the vent, everything. Then we make a copy for the police. But before that, I want to go back." I stared at him. "Back where?" "To the house. There's more down there." I didn't check the crawl space behind the furnace. "I think that's where he stored the gas feed." "No," I said sharply. "You can't. What if he's there?" "Then I'll deal with it," he said, voice quiet but certain. "He won't hurt me. He's still my father." The words chilled me more than the air did. That sentence, "he won't hurt me," was something mothers say before the newspaper prints the opposite. That night we waited in the truck across from my old street. The maple tree outside the house stood black against the dusk, its branches twitching in the wind. The porch light was off. Daniel's sedan was gone. "Stay here," Luke said.
No.
He looked at me. "I mean it. And I mean no." I opened the door. I've been sitting still for months, while someone tried to erase me quietly. Not anymore. He sighed but didn't argue. We crossed the lawn together, silent. The front door still stuck on the same warped hinge Robert never fixed. Inside, the air was thick with that faint chemical smell I'd come to think of as sickness. Luke went straight to the basement. The stairs groaned under us. When his flashlight cut through the dark, I saw the walls. Insulation peeled back, fresh piping gleaming silver. He crouched by the furnace. There. He pointed to a box mounted behind it, the same type as the one in his photo. But this one had a new wire running into the wall. He followed it with his flashlight beam. It disappeared behind the fuse box. He opened the panel. Inside, someone had rigged a second switch, a bypass that fed directly into the timer. "Grandma," Luke said, voice tight, "this isn't just a leak timer. It's connected to the circuit breaker." He could trigger it remotely. I stared at the wall, the thin veins of copper running like nerves through the house Robert built with love. Someone had grafted evil into its bones. Luke pulled out his phone and started recording everything. "We'll send this to the police right now," he said. I turned and froze. A pair of headlights washed through the small basement window. Luke cursed under his breath. "He's back. He killed the flashlight." Darkness swallowed us. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. We heard the front door open upstairs. Footsteps. Daniel's voice, quiet, muttering to himself. He was talking to someone on the phone. "I'm handling it, yeah, tonight." "No, she's with him." Luke and I exchanged a look. "With who?" I mouthed. He held up a finger.
Wait.
Daniel moved through the kitchen. We heard the sound of something heavy, a toolbox maybe, being set down. Then the click of the basement light switch. It didn't work. Luke had pulled the fuse. Daniel cursed softly. "Stay behind me," Luke whispered. He picked up a length of metal pipe from the floor and crouched behind the furnace. Daniel's shoes appeared at the top of the stairs. Slow, deliberate steps. One by one. I could see his silhouette framed in the faint light from the window. He carried a small metal canister. Another one of those devices. "Dad," Luke shouted suddenly. Daniel froze halfway down. "Luke, don't. Put that down." "I found the timer," Luke said, stepping into the beam of his phone's flashlight. "You did this. You wired Mom's," he stopped, corrected himself. "Grandma's room to fill with gas." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." Luke stepped closer. "Then tell me what this is." He pointed at the canister. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me. "I was fixing it. I came to remove the old equipment. After you found out we left." Luke asked.
Sure.
Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a mix of guilt and calculation. Then he said softly, "Luke, you don't understand. They were going to fire me. Everything I've worked for, gone. The house was the only way to pay it back." "By killing your mother?" Luke's voice cracked. "You're supposed to protect her." Daniel's hand shook. "I didn't want it to happen this way. I just needed more time." And then the faint click of his phone filled the silence, the unmistakable tap of someone pressing a button. Luke's eyes widened. He armed it. The furnace made a faint hiss. "Run," Luke shouted, grabbing my arm. We bolted up the stairs, the air behind us turning thick and wrong. I stumbled onto the lawn, gasping, while Luke turned and sprinted back toward the basement door. "Luke," I screamed. "Don't." He disappeared inside. A beat later, the entire house exhaled, a deep metallic groan like the walls were breathing. The porch light flickered once, twice, then went out. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was worse, a deep, choking roar, like the house itself was suffocating. The air around me shimmered. A single window shattered outward, spraying shards across the yard like glittering rain. "Luke," I screamed, running forward. The smell hit me first, acrid gas and smoke, burning my throat raw. I reached the front steps, but the door had swollen shut from the heat. I pounded until my hands hurt.
Luke.
Answer me. A crash echoed inside, faint, then another. A shape moved in the smoke-filled hallway. My knees nearly gave out. Luke. The door suddenly burst open from the inside. Luke stumbled out, coughing, his face streaked with soot. He dragged a small metal canister behind him and dropped it on the lawn. It's armed, he gasped. He was setting a failsafe. I caught him as he fell to his knees. Are you hurt? He shook his head, still coughing. We have to. A second noise cut through the air, an engine revving. Daniel's car. We both turned toward the driveway. My son's silhouette stood beside his sedan, a dark figure against the rising smoke. He wasn't running toward us. He was getting in.
Dad.
Luke shouted. Daniel froze halfway into the driver's seat. For a brief second, our eyes met across the yard. A mother and son, the space between us filled with 40 years of memories turned poisonous. He slammed the door shut and sped off. Luke lurched forward. We can still catch him. No, my voice came out sharper than I meant. You're not chasing a desperate man who just tried to blow up his own mother's house. He looked at me, wild, breathless. We have proof now. He's running. We need to finish this. I stared at the smoke curling out of my bedroom window, the same window I'd sat beside every morning, reading the paper, pretending my dizziness was just age. We finish it, I said. But not like this. We didn't go to the police that night. We went to Robert's old workshop, the small storage shed behind the burned garden fence, half buried in ivy. Inside, the air smelled like sawdust and rust, untouched for years. Luke hooked his laptop to a power bank and started uploading everything, photos, videos, the recordings of Daniel's voice. I'll mirror the files to the cloud, he said. If anything happens, it's all backed up. I sat on an overturned bucket, holding the scorched canister he dragged out. The metal was warm even hours later. Your grandfather used to build this place for safety, I said quietly. He wanted us to have something that couldn't be taken away. Luke glanced over. He built it right. It wasn't the house that tried to kill you. It was the man who rewired it. I turned the canister in my hands. The edges were etched with faint initials, DH. My son's handwriting. His mark of ownership. The irony of it burned worse than the smoke. By morning, we'd driven to the next county, to an old friend of Robert's, Cal Whitmore, a retired inspector who used to handle construction safety permits. He owed my husband a favor. When Cal saw me on his porch, his expression faltered.
Evie? What happened to you? Long story, I said.
And I don't have time to tell it gently. We sat in his kitchen. Luke laid out the laptop and the physical parts, the timer, the valve system, the wiring photos. Cal put on his glasses, studied everything, then exhaled low. This isn't amateur work. Whoever did this knew how to rig gas lines into an electrical system without tripping the main. That's sophisticated. That's my son, I said bitterly. He looked up sharply. Daniel? The engineer? Apparently the criminal, too, Luke said. You've got more than enough evidence to start a case. But if he's running, you'll need the police involved now. Otherwise, he'll disappear before they even check the warrant system. I want to go to them, I said. But I also want to know why. Why would my son risk everything? Not just money.
Me.
Cal hesitated, then said, You said he was behind on something.
Debts.
Luke pulled up an email thread he'd hacked earlier. Messages between Daniel and a company marked Apex Holdings legal department. They terminated him, Luke said. 3 weeks ago. For breach of safety protocol and illegal testing of residential automation. Looks like he was trying to sell a smart home system using unapproved gas-integrated climate control. He probably used Grandma's house as his prototype. My stomach dropped. He experimented on me.
Not just that, Luke said. He was going to sell it.
Probably to recover the company's losses before they reported him.
That's attempted
manslaughter at minimum. maybe worse. I looked at Luke. His eyes were dark, haunted. We need to bring him in before he hurts anyone else, he said. That evening, the sky turned the color of blood and ash. We parked near a diner off Route 19, a truck stop where Luke said Daniel's car had pinged on an old toll camera database. The place was half empty, the kind of diner where the waitress calls everyone honey and the coffee tastes like engine oil. Luke watched the window. His car's been here. I guarantee it. I sipped my tea and tried to steady my hands. Do you think he knows we're following him? He knows, Luke said. He's too careful not to. The doorbell jingled. A man walked in wearing a gray hoodie and baseball cap. He looked around once, then sat at the far end of the counter. My breath caught. Even beneath the cap, I knew that profile. My son. Luke, I whispered. He nodded once. Stay here. He slid out of the booth, moving quiet, controlled. But before he reached Daniel, the man at the counter turned, eyes meeting mine, and smiled. It wasn't Daniel. It was someone else. The man tilted his head and said, Mrs. Hart. I froze. Do I know you? I want to go to them, I said. But I also want to know why. Why would my son risk everything? Not just money. Me. Cal hesitated, then said, You said he was behind on something. Debts. Luke pulled up an email thread he'd hacked earlier, messages between Daniel and a company marked Apex Holdings legal department. They terminated him, Luke said, 3 weeks ago, for breach of safety protocol and illegal testing of residential automation. Looks like he was trying to sell a smart home system using unapproved gas-integrated climate control. He probably used Grandma's house as his prototype. My stomach dropped. He experimented on me. Not just that, Luke said. He was going to sell it. Probably to recover the company's losses before they reported him. That's attempted manslaughter at minimum. Maybe worse. I looked at Luke. His eyes were dark, haunted. We need to bring him in before he hurts anyone else, he said. That evening, the sky turned the color of blood and ash. We parked near a diner off Route 19, a truck stop where Luke said Daniel's car had pinged on an old toll camera database. The place was half empty, the kind of diner where the waitress calls everyone honey and the coffee tastes like engine oil. Luke watched the window. His car's been here. I guarantee it. I sipped my tea and tried to steady my hands. Do you think he knows we're following him? He knows, Luke said. He's too careful not to. The doorbell jingled. A man walked in wearing a gray hoodie and baseball cap. He looked around once, then sat at the far end of the counter. My breath caught. Even beneath the cap, I knew that profile. My son. Luke, I whispered. He nodded once. Stay here. He slid out of the booth, moving quiet, controlled. But before he reached Daniel, the man at the counter turned, eyes meeting mine, and smiled. It wasn't Daniel. It was someone else. The man tilted his head and said, Mrs. Hart. I froze. Do I know you? He tapped his phone. A video call blinked open. Daniel's face appeared, live, sitting in a moving car. Hello, Mom, he said. His voice was calm. You really should have stayed out of this. Where are you? I demanded. On my way to finish what you started, he said softly. I frowned. What are you talking about? He smiled, cold, deliberate. You shouldn't have gone to Cal. My blood ran cold. How do you know? Behind us, glass shattered. Luke dove toward me as the front window exploded inward. Tires squealed outside. Someone screamed. The man in the hoodie was gone. We hit the floor. My ears rang. Smoke poured through the broken glass, not from fire, but from a small device rolling across the tiles. Gas. Luke grabbed my hand. Move. We ran through the kitchen exit, bursting out into the cold evening air. Behind us, the diner filled with white vapor. A waitress stumbled out coughing. Someone shouted for help. I turned and saw Daniel's sedan at the far edge of the parking lot. He was watching us through the windshield. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then he lowered the window, holding up something small, a remote. Luke shouted, Down. The remote clicked. The diner erupted in a blast of glass and flame. Heat punched through the air, throwing us backward into the dirt. My ears screamed with silence. When I lifted my head, all I could see was fire. The diner gone. The night burning. And Daniel's car, speeding away into the darkness. I crawled to Luke. His arm was bleeding, but he was breathing. He opened his eyes slowly. "He's not stopping," he whispered. "He's not going to stop until we stop him." I looked at the road, smoke rising behind us, and felt something inside me break and harden all at once. "No," I said. "He's not going to stop. But neither am I." I picked up the canister that had rolled from my purse, the same one he'd built. It glinted in the firelight, still engraved with his initials. I whispered, "You made this, Daniel. Let's see how it feels when it turns on you." The firelight reflected in Luke's eyes as he stared at me. "Grandma," he said quietly, "what are you thinking?" I stood, watching the flames devour what was left of the diner. "I'm thinking it's time my son learns the house he built wasn't the only one that can fight back." The night the diner burned down, I stopped being a victim. The police called it a gas malfunction. They never found Daniel's car on the cameras. He'd planned it too well, planted a decoy, disappeared before the first responders even arrived. But I knew better. He was alive. And I'd raised him well enough to know exactly what he'd do next. Luke sat on the back of the ambulance, his arm wrapped in gauze. "They think we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time," he said bitterly. "Good," I said. "Let them." He looked at me. "Grandma, we should be giving this evidence to the police. Not whatever you're planning." I held his gaze. "What I'm planning, Luke, is to make sure your father never gets another chance to explain anything away. He turned the house your grandfather built into a weapon. So we'll turn his own mind into one." The next morning, we drove to Oak Ridge Estates, the new housing development Daniel had been working on before everything fell apart. It was a graveyard of half-built dreams, unfinished homes with hollow windows, concrete foundations cracked by neglect. Luke pulled up the blueprints on his tablet. "Look at this," he said. "Every house in this phase has the same vent system as yours." He was replicating it. I walked through the open frame of one of them, the floorboards creaking under my shoes. "He was testing mass production?" I whispered. "Perfecting it." Luke nodded grimly. "We can use this. If we set the wiring the way he did, but trigger a false reading, we could make him think the system is active again." "You want to bait him?" He looked up.
No, Grandma.
"I want to catch him." That evening, we set up camp inside one of the unfinished houses. Luke brought a portable generator, a laptop, and a nest of wires that made no sense to me, but he moved through them like a surgeon. "This will look like the live feed from one of his prototypes," he explained. "If he's still monitoring his devices remotely, he'll see it light up. That'll draw him here." I sat by the window, watching the sky bleed from blue to purple. "You think he'll come?" Luke smiled faintly. "He can't resist control. Men like him never can." I wanted to tell him he sounded too much like his father when he said that, but the words stayed in my throat. We waited 2 nights. Nothing. Then, on the 3rd night, movement. A car engine, low and cautious, somewhere down the gravel road. Luke glanced at his laptop. The screen flickered. "Connection established," he whispered. "He's in." "Stay out of sight," I said. Headlights washed briefly over the broken walls, then died. The car door clicked open. Daniel stepped out, wearing the same dark jacket he'd worn the night of the motel, but now he looked worse. Pale, unshaven, trembling slightly. He walked straight to the unfinished house, flashlights slicing through the dark. "Luke," he shouted. "I know you're here." I stayed hidden behind the staircase. My heartbeat felt like it could crack my ribs. Daniel walked deeper inside, his voice echoing. "You think you can outsmart me? You have no idea how deep this goes. They were watching me, both of you." Luke's voice came from upstairs. "We're not watching you, Dad. We're recording you." Daniel's flashlight jerked upward.
Luke. Please.
"You don't understand. I understand you built a death machine and tested it on Grandma," Luke said, his voice shaking with anger. "You made me part of it when you taught me how to build. You turned what Grandpa gave us into something evil. Daniel's voice cracked. I didn't have a choice. They threatened me. The investors, they wanted results. Then you should have walked away, I said, stepping out from the shadows. His head whipped toward me. The flashlight trembled in his hand. Mom. He looked smaller than I remembered, not the boy I raised, not even the man who'd carried my groceries after Robert's funeral. Just a frightened child pretending to be in control. You nearly killed me, I said quietly. I was trying to save everything your husband built. No, I said. You were trying to save yourself. He shook his head, wild. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. I took a step closer. I lost him. And now I've lost you. Don't talk to me about losing everything. Luke moved fast. He pressed a key on his laptop and the walls around us came alive, faint beeping, like a system powering on. Red lights blinked through the vents. Daniel froze. What did you do? Luke said, I rebuilt your system, Dad. But this time, it's not connected to gas. It's connected to your own trigger device. Daniel looked down at the remote in his hand, the same one he'd used to blow up the diner. His thumb hovered over the button. You're bluffing. Luke shook his head. Try me. For a long, terrible second, no one breathed. Then Daniel's hand started to shake. I never meant for any of this. You meant for Grandma to die quietly so you could sell her house, Luke said. That's what you meant. Daniel's eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Guilt. Real, crushing guilt. He lowered the remote. I just wanted to fix what I broke, he said softly. I stepped closer, tears burning my eyes. Then start by confessing. He looked at me, then at Luke. For the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, he might listen. Then the laptop beeped. A new signal appeared on the screen, one neither of us recognized. Luke frowned. Wait, that's not me. Daniel's face changed instantly. His voice went cold. You think you're the only ones who know how to set traps? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small transmitter, smaller than a phone, blinking rapidly. Dad, what is that? Luke demanded. Daniel smiled faintly. Failsafe. Luke's hand shot for the keyboard. No. The walls hummed. Somewhere behind us, the generator roared to life. The red lights turned white hot. Run, Luke shouted. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, come with me. I tore away. You've done enough. He lunged toward the door, but before he reached it, the entire frame shuddered. The air filled with the sound of cracking wood and grinding metal. Luke grabbed me, dragging me toward the stairs as the first wall buckled inward. We dove under the landing just as the ceiling collapsed, filling the air with dust and heat. When the noise stopped, the generator flickered and died. Smoke poured from the wiring. Luke coughed hard. He's gone, he said, voice hoarse. I turned and saw Daniel pinned beneath part of the wall, his hand still gripping the remote. He was breathing barely. Dad, Luke whispered, moving toward him. I caught his sleeve. No, don't. Luke looked at me, torn. He's still alive. I stared at Daniel, my son, lying in the debris of his own creation. His lips moved. Help me, Mom. I felt something tear inside me. You built this, I whispered. You finish it. I stood slowly, leaving him there. Luke hesitated for one long second, then followed me out into the cold night. Behind us, the unfinished house flickered like a dying heartbeat. One last hum of power before silence. We didn't look back. Hours later, at dawn, we sat in the truck overlooking the valley. Smoke curled in the distance from the half-built house. Luke's voice was quiet. You think he's gone? I stared at the horizon. If there's any justice left, yes. He didn't respond. But when the sun rose higher, a single siren wailed somewhere far below, faint, but growing louder. I gripped the edge of my seat. He's not done, I said. That sound, that's not rescue. That's him. Luke frowned. What do you mean? I looked at the canister still sitting between us, the one engraved with his initials. The light caught it, reflecting a single blinking red I hadn't noticed before. My blood went cold. Luke, I whispered. He said another failsafe. The canister emitted a faint beep. Luke's eyes widened. Grandma. The sound filled the truck like a heartbeat, steady, sharp, unrelenting. Luke's eyes met mine. Grandma, it's armed. The red light pulsed against the windshield, painting the whole cabin in warning. Throw it out, I whispered. He grabbed the canister, yanked open the door, and hurled it into the ditch. We ducked. A dull thud followed by a hiss of white gas.
No explosión.
Just silence and steam curling up from the dirt. Luke's chest heaved. Non-lethal, he said. Just gas. Another scare tactic. But my gut said different. Not a scare, I murmured. A message. We drove to the police station in town, or tried to. But as we turned down Main Street, we saw the flashing lights already waiting for us. 2 cruisers. Officers stepping out with cautious eyes. Mrs. Harper, one called. Luke Harper. Luke's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He framed us, he muttered. I opened the door slowly. Officers, you don't understand. Ma'am, the taller one said, we have a report linking your vehicle to an arson site near Oak Ridge Estates. Luke's jaw dropped. That was him. He tried to kill us. Please step away from the vehicle.
I did.
Calmly, because panic wouldn't save us now. Daniel's shadow was everywhere, his fingerprints, his lies, his careful destruction. And yet there was something he didn't know. At the hospital, weeks earlier, when my blood work came back showing carbon monoxide poisoning, I'd asked for a full toxicology report, and I'd kept a copy. Inside it was the key to everything, trace compounds that shouldn't have been there. Additives. Synthetic markers used only in industrial gas systems. Not household leaks. Not accidents. Murder. I reached slowly into my purse and handed the folded paper to the officer. You'll want to call Detective Ramirez at County, I said. She's been waiting for my call. He took it, uncertain, and stepped aside to radio it in. Luke whispered, You had this the whole time? I smiled faintly. Your grandfather taught me never to play all my cards at once. 2 hours later, we were sitting in an interview room. The detective, Ramirez, looked tired but sharp. Mrs. Harper, I just got confirmation. Those samples, they're a match for systems used in Apex Aerospace testing sites. She turned to Luke. Your father's company. That's a big lead. Luke nodded grimly. He was the one who designed them. Ramirez leaned back. Well, that's going to make this very interesting. A knock at the door interrupted her. An officer stepped in, whispered something, and handed her a phone. She frowned, then hit speaker. A voice came through, calm, confident, and far too familiar. Detective Ramirez. You've been busy. Daniel. My blood ran cold. I think we should have a conversation. Off the record. There are things you don't understand about what really happened at Oak Ridge. Ramirez said, Mr. Harper, where are you calling from? Home. I closed my eyes. Our home. The drive back to the house felt like walking into a grave. The maple tree outside swayed against a gray sky. The windows stared blankly, the same way they had the morning I'd left. Ramirez led a small team, cautious, guns drawn. Luke stayed, close beside me. He's not going to stop, he whispered. He wants you to see him win. I shook my head.
No.
He wants me to see him beg. We stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of burnt dust. The heater had been running. My old coffee cup still sat on the table, half full, a ghost of that morning before everything fell apart. Then a voice echoed from upstairs. Mom. He stood on the landing, pale but alive, one arm in a sling, eyes wild. You should have left me alone. Ramirez stepped forward. Daniel Harper, you're under arrest. He lifted a small black remote. I wouldn't. The team froze. He gestured toward the ceiling. See, the beauty of my design was never in the gas. It was in control. You seal a house, you control the air. You control everything. Daniel, I said softly, you're sick. He laughed, hollow and cruel. No, Mother.
I'm awake.
You all lived in illusions.
Safety.
Family.
Love.
All fake. Just systems waiting to fail. He pointed the remote at the ceiling. Now you'll see what failure feels like. I stepped forward. You forgot one thing, Daniel. He sneered. What's that? That you didn't build this house alone. He frowned, and Luke hit the switch. A deep mechanical click echoed through the walls. Then silence. Daniel pressed his button again. Nothing happened. Luke stepped from behind the doorway, holding his laptop. You used Grandpa's blueprints. You forgot I have them too. Daniel's face drained of color. What did you do? Luke's voice was steady. Rewired your failsafe to the police frequency. Every time you press that button, you're sending a distress ping directly to them. Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder. Daniel looked around, panicked. No, you can't. He bolted down the stairs. Ramirez shouted for her officers to move. Luke followed, but I stepped in front of him. Let me, I said. I found Daniel in the basement, the same basement where it had all started. The same place Luke had found the hidden pipes. He stood by the furnace, trembling, his hand still clutching the remote. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I just wanted out. I wanted peace. I looked at him, and for a heartbeat, I saw the little boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard, proud of every petal. You could have had peace, I said softly. You just had to tell the truth. He shook his head. Truth doesn't fix anything. No, I said. But it frees you. He looked at the remote again, then at me. Do you think you're better than me? I took a slow step closer. No, Daniel. I think I'm your mother. He raised the remote. Don't come closer. I reached out. You can still stop this. For a moment I thought he might. His hand shook. His eyes glistened. Then he pressed the button. There was no explosion, just the sound of heavy boots and a voice behind him shouting, "Drop it." Ramirez's officers tackled him before he could move again. The remote clattered to the floor and skidded to my feet. Daniel screamed, but the sound broke into sobs as they cuffed him. I stared down at the small black device, the weapon of his pride, and whispered, "It's over." 2 months later, the house was gone, condemned, demolished by the city. The maple tree still stood. I watched the empty lot from the truck window while Luke loaded the last box of what little we'd salvaged. He climbed in, shut the door, and looked at me. You ready? I nodded. Your grandfather built that house to keep us safe. You rebuilt it to save me. I think that's what he would have wanted. He smiled faintly. You think he'd be proud? I looked at him, his hands, his eyes, the same calm strength Walter once had. I don't think, I said. I know. We drove away as the sun broke through the clouds. Behind us, the wind moved through the tall grass where the house once stood, whispering against the earth, as if the walls themselves were finally exhaling.